and haters out there that say that AI will kill recruitment. The recruitment industry keeps on growing 8% year on year for agencies. It's a people-led business, selling people to people. I think it's going to be another 10, 15 years before any AI or any technology can fully take over that process. So I think...
You're listening to the 9 to Survive podcast, where we speak to the most inspiring entrepreneurs of Australia. I'm your host, Alex Whiteside, the CEO of EasyCompanies. Running your own business can be quite daunting and scary. We're here to show you how to face those fears and help you build your dream today. We listen to the innovators, the game changers, and the thought leaders who have built their startups from the ground up. Hear what makes them tick, how they've overcome their own failures, and be inspired to take your own leap of faith and ignite your passion for business. So on today's show, we have Chris Almond from Sourcr. So he's running an online recruitment platform, trying to join companies and recruiters together. So it's a marketplace. And if you haven't already, make sure you like us on Facebook and subscribe to this podcast on whatever app you're listening in and on YouTube. Hope you enjoy the show. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you.
So it's good to have you on the 9 to Survive podcast. Now, you're co-founded Sourcr. Maybe just tell us a little bit about what Sourcr does.
Yeah, of course. So Sourcr is a recruitment marketplace that helps employers in the market navigate the recruitment agency space. So what we found is it's actually a real challenge to find specialist recruiters within a given market. So we've created a marketplace where employers can post a job and we'll match them with specialist recruiters based on that role. And what we're finding is we're managing to help those employers hire people a lot better and a lot cheaper than going direct to agency. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, we're pretty aligned with that at EasyCompanies, because one of the hardest challenges we've had is finding the right candidates. And not only that, it's finding the right recruitment agencies, because nowadays it just seems there's so many, right?
Yeah, it's a challenge. We've sort of seen over the last 10 years the market fragment. So 10 years ago, the likes of your Hayes, your Robert Walters and your Michael Page would be able to deliver for you on all cylinders, so to speak. Whereas these days, it's really important to find specialist recruiters in niche markets in order to get the best results. But as a business, it's really difficult to understand where you can find these guys. So that's why we've sort of created a platform that optimizes it, really. Yeah,
because when you type in recruitment on Google, you get all those big guys you just mentioned, Hayes and that, and it's like, you almost think, I'm just going to pick up the phone and these guys are going to solve all my problems. You know?
Which, look, there are good recruiters in those spaces, but there are really good recruiters as well in their own small businesses.
And that's what I've seen.
It's all about visibility. How do we make those guys visible to you?
And I definitely think for startups, you get more attention from the smaller tier recruitment firms.
We've tended to
small to mid. I mean, that's not always the case, but you know, obviously the bigger entities have bigger budgets and bigger sales targets and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, of course. So we can't comment necessarily too much on the bigger agencies, but what we know is the service levels that we see from the smaller ones have been fantastic. And the relationships that they create with the employers and that care factor is really important, particularly as a smaller business where your first hires are really critical. You want to make sure that care factor's there.
And scary too.
It is very scary, because unfortunately, you know it happens wrong, and it takes a lot of time to ruminate and decide who your first hire is going to be. So you've got to make sure it's right.
Yeah, love it. What got you into business? What did you want to be when you were growing up?
That's a good question. I suppose when I was going through school, I didn't really have a focus or an idea of what I wanted to be. I toyed with the idea of a fireman. I toyed with the idea of being a pilot. But I suppose in the back of my mind, I always wanted to be a businessman of some sort. I was really good with numbers. So I took the traditional path of going into finance, went to university and did a finance degree there with a view to going into investment banking. And I think after that sort of eye-opening experience of moving to a different city and going to university, I decided that I wanted to, eventually try something for myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you've co-founded this business now.
Yeah.
What was it like, having to leave a job and start this business?
Yeah, it's pretty daunting.
Yeah.
I suppose the way I looked at it when we first made the big step is there was no opportunity that I would have that would have been better than the current situation I was in as a person. You know, I had a partner at the time, but we had no additional responsibilities of kids or a mortgage or anything like that. So it just felt right. The question that I used to play in my mind was, what is the worst that can happen? And that sort of really drove me to make that first big step.
Yeah, it's true. It's you know, as a business owner, it's like when you're in a well-paying job in a position, it's like, you know, I mean, for me, in saying that, it was quite scary, even with all that kind of security. But at the same time, you're right. If you look at the what ifs, what's the worst that can happen? Yeah,
and that's the way I view it. You're doing it. No one's going to get you out of bed in the morning. You've got to be self-motivated to do it yourself, and you've got to understand that, look, yeah, you're not going to be getting the salary you probably got previously, but it's a means to an end, and there's hopefully a risk-reward factor with that.
Hopefully, yeah. So, I mean, what's it been like having a co-founder in business? How do you deal with the kind of day-to-day operations? Do you split roles, or do you kind of mesh into each one?
Me and my co-founder have known each other a very long time. So myself and James actually went to university together. So we lived together for 4 years.
So there's a good relationship there already.
Yeah, great. Yeah. We know when to tell each other to piss off, and we know when to work with each other. So, which I know some co-founders struggle with. I speak with a lot of founders who don't necessarily have a close personal relationship.
That haven't had that kind of backing as a friendship.
Exactly, yeah. And I think it helps us be more honest with each other. So we see ourselves as co-CEOs as well, and it helps us make sure that we put enough thought behind some of the bigger decisions in the business. We've pivoted our platform a little bit. So I'm tending to focus more on the recruiter side of the platform, and James focuses more on the client side at the moment. But in saying that, when we come to strategical decisions,
it's as a whole, as a business. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yes, that sounds like it works well. And like, where did the idea come from in terms of getting, you know, Sourcr off the ground? Where did you find this idea?
Yeah, so my co-founder was a former recruiter at a recruitment agency, and his challenge day to day was he was spending probably 50 or 60% of his time on business development as a recruiter, which seemed, I suppose, quite interesting to both of us, because most of their time should be spent sourcing and finding candidates. And if you look at any other traditional professional services, lawyers, accountants, whatnot, you don't see those guys going out and having to source their own business through cold calls and whatnot. So there's a fundamental disconnect. And on the other side of the equation, I was an employer. I was working in a private equity firm, and I managed a portfolio of about 23 accounts. And often as a corporate arm, they'd come to us and ask for their next senior hires. Where should they go? Who should they speak to? And I'd chat with James, and I'd say, should we use this particular agency that he worked with? And he didn't know anyone in that agency who worked in particular finance niches. So we realised that there's a better way to connect the two sides of the market, employers and recruiters, and came up with this idea and sort of ran with it. Did a bit of research overseas, and it was doing quite well in the UK and US. And
the model of this business?
Yeah, exactly. So the model of posting jobs and having a marketplace of recruiters on the other side. So really taking that business development side away from recruitment agencies. And seeing the successes of it overseas probably gave us the confidence and validation.
Confidence it was going to work here.
Yeah, exactly. And then we took the leap and never looked back.
Yeah, and now you've recently you're able to secure seed funding.
Yes.
And can you tell us about the process of going through that? Because I'm sure a lot of businesses that are, you know, looking for either angel or VC would be quite interested in that.
Yeah, of course. So we raised through a syndicate of investors called Sydney Angels. They obviously work out of Sydney. A bunch of high net worth individuals, and you go through a pitching process with them where you apply, go through a pitch with 5 other startups. You get whittled down to 3, and then from that 3 they make a decision who they want to invest with. As part of, I suppose, my learnings in doing that is when you're pitching to these guys, particularly if you're at the stage where we were at, where we weren't necessarily profitable, we were just generating revenue, or you're talking very, very early stage, you've got to paint the bigger picture. You've got to paint the fact that you've really addressed this problem, you've done your research on that problem, and paint this bigger picture and how it can turn into what they deem as...
Do you feel it helped having, success in that industry overseas? Like, did you bring in that insight, or not particularly?
Yeah, we did actually. Little snippets of amounts that they'd raised and the successes and the businesses that they'd worked with. It, again, paints this picture of trust. It's all about social proofing, right? The two key important things for most investors, I say, is one, the team, and two, the proof behind the pudding or the concept that you're trying to build. So anything that you can do to remove these barriers is going to make it more likely that you're hopefully going to raise funds and get your business to the next stage. Yeah,
we're pretty risk averse here in Australia, aren't we? Do you find that?
Yeah, we spoke to a hell of a lot of investors who wanted your traction, your metric numbers, and
like,
all that. Sort of
tell me that this is going to work.
Yes, exactly.
Leave little risk on the table, and then here's
that's
here's
it.
the convertible note.
It's what I found is with some of the more sophisticated investors, they were expecting scientific metrics that small businesses haven't worked out exactly what they are yet, and that was a challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest thing being a startup is sometimes when you look at, you kind of want to forecast everything, you kind of want to understand everything, and you do all these, statistics and forecasts, but there's so many errors in it because it's just, you don't have a proper data scientist, or you haven't gone through the rigmarole. So it all looks sound, and then later you go back a month later and you're like, hold on, there's an error in that,
The one thing that I know about forecasts that is always right is every forecast is wrong.
Yeah.
So I understand that you have to.
It's good to have an idea of the buffer. But,
exactly. Yeah. It's more stress testing and sensitivity, cash flow. That's really important, but it's a goal more than anything.
Yeah.
I think.
So you highlighted before that you're bridging the gap of business development for recruiters, or at least in their marketing engines, right?
Yeah.
What are their major challenges as a recruitment firm? Is it just lack of investment in marketing, or? Yeah,
I think investment in education. It's a very traditional business model, recruitment. Most people have experienced recruiters before. They're very sales driven. Their KPIs in terms of an individual in an agency are very sales driven, and it means that sometimes it can come across as pushy because they're required to do their own sales. As much as that's always going to be an important part of recruitment, if we can take, I suppose, some of that away from the agencies that we're working with, it means they can focus on aligned goals with the employer, which is finding the right candidates.
Yeah, so they spend more time finding better candidates.
Yes.
And you're finding, they're kind of more focused on the candidates, and you're more focused on getting them the clients, like the employers.
Yeah, exactly. It's called traditionally in the market, it's called a 360 recruiter, where they're responsible for the candidate side and responsible for the business development side. My belief is people that are really good at the business development side aren't necessarily good at the sourcing and account management side of things. So if we can focus on, for these particular recruiters who prefer the sourcing side and prefer the relationships and finding candidates, and remove this business development aspect, we can make much more well-rounded recruiters.
Yeah, that's true. So what's been the insight so far from recruitment agencies in terms of the work that you're doing in this space? Have you had pushback, or is it really well received?
It's pretty well received. I'd say 90%, 95% of recruiters that we approached to come onto the platform were really interested. I mentioned before that we'd sort of gone through a bit of a pivot with the product. We're very much a marketplace. I suppose one of the findings that we discovered over the last 12, 18 months were reviews and testimonials were the really big part of the decision making for employers. They wanted more reviews and testimonials on the recruiters that they were deciding to engage. And recruiters wanted to use the reviews that they had collected from other employers that they use outside of Sourcr. So we've sort of created this separate review and recommendations platform for the recruiters as well, which has been great. It helps them improve their personal brand and provides a little bit more extra value to the guys outside of just the marketplace and what that can provide for them.
Yeah, and In terms of growing the business, what's been the biggest challenges you've faced?
Challenging growth is always revenue. I think you said before that the Australian market is pretty conservative. I tend to agree, particularly at the bigger end. So conceptually, if they're used to this traditional way of using recruiters previously, it's sometimes hard to get breakthrough. So,
like, to get people to change the mindset.
Absolutely, yeah. There's to remove this barrier of uncertainty was very difficult in the start. So we were very conscious of creating case studies of successes and how things worked, and using that as ammo as part of our sales and marketing. But again, as a revenue model, we're a marketplace, so it can be crocodile teeth. Just because you have a really successful month, 1 month, it doesn't mean the next month's going to be successful. So
you find seasonality in the space?
Yeah, seasonality, even just month on month bad luck. It's the nature of perm recruitment that we call champagne and razor blades. Sometimes you're on a high, sometimes you're on a low. So we're moving into the temp space, which hopefully will provide a little bit more consistency for that revenue, and it means that we can predict our growth a little bit better.
Yeah, nice. So you're saying that, because certain employers are looking at certain times of the year, temps kind of flatten that out.
Yeah, exactly. So the way that temp works, because it's people continuously in business and it's not just a payment fee up front, it creates a little bit more consistency in that revenue line, which is important for any startup to be able to sort of predict the next steps and who the next hires are going to be and where the next money is going to get invested. You need to know it's coming in, right?
Yeah. I'm interested. Have you used Sourcr yourself?
We kind of pseudo have used Sourcr ourselves, yeah. So obviously we don't have to post on our own platform, but yeah, we've used the recruiters.
That'd look good though, right?
Yeah, it would, I suppose. We should...
Because we've used EasyCompanies ourselves. We've had to set up a few companies, and it's like, should we use ourselves? Should we use a competitor?
That's good vindication for your product then, eh?
Yeah. Well, it's like you could use a competitor so you can get insights on how it's all working, right?
True, yeah. But if you're confident in your own product and what it does...
It's good, actually, because when you use your own product, you start to see, like, all the emails, like, completely as if you're a customer. And then you're like, hold on, this email template needs to be updated or something, It's true. Just that experience of actually using it yourself. But yeah, I was interested to know.
Yeah, we sort of did it off panel as such, or off product, but it probably would be worth taking a look at to see how we can hire our next person via Sourcr as a complete outsider. It's I'd like to think if we did post to a competitor that they'd probably spot us and take us off the platform, but then again, I'm not sure. I don't think you'd be too happy.
Yeah. Well, are there, is it a very competitive space, the marketplace that you're building in terms of recruitment? Is that a very competitive space?
Not really at all. There is another competitor in the market. They've got a little bit of a different spin on their model, but they're very much Brisbane centric. They're based up in Queensland. So in our Sydney market, we predominantly work Sydney, Melbourne. We don't necessarily see any direct competitors. Yeah, which is good, but then at the same time it's difficult because there's not a lot to learn from. We're always a moving vehicle.
So what's worked really well in terms of getting the business off the ground? I mean, we've just spoken about the challenges. What is it that's really excelled the business, you find?
We've been very UX focused with the product. We've always wanted to make sure that it's a really simple design and it's really easy for companies to come on board, post a job and connect with recruiters. So the time metrics through posting a job to getting matched with the recruiters to receiving your first candidates is less than a week, whereas off market you're talking 2 to 3 weeks potentially. So that's what we're competing against. We need to make it a lot better and a lot simpler. So being design led, we get compliments all the time about the simplicity of our product and how well it works and whatnot. And I think that has probably helped create some word of mouth around it as well, which continually brings in new leads for us, which is great. We don't get a lot of leads from marketing inbound as such. We're very much outbound. We've got a business development team. We've got referrals that come in. So in order for us to be a success, we need to make sure that the service we're providing is great, so then other people can refer into Sourcr and we continue to grow.
Yeah. So I was reading an article on your LinkedIn about mental wellness. So it was actually quite inspiring, like a lot of the, topics you were covering. What's your approach in terms of incorporating or maybe actually the first thing we should cover is like, what are your kind of approaches to mental wellness?
It's a good question, because if you would have asked me 12 months ago, before I started looking into it more and wrote the article, it was very much a secondary thought to me. And as I started exploring it, I realised that I'd probably not been looking after myself, from a health and wellness perspective since I'd started the business. You'll know yourself.
I know, yeah.
You start a business and that's, second. All your energy is spent on growing the business and making sure that you're doing things as best you can. And it just got to the point where I was like, well, you need to start looking after yourself. So in the mornings, I'm up at the gym, 6 a.m. in the morning before I get to work. There's no excuse. People will say they're too busy, but I honestly find that if I don't exercise, my productivity levels will significantly drop. So I don't know whether you sort of feel the same.
Yeah.
I go to the gym and I always try and get away from my desk for at least 10 minutes a day on my lunch. Just step outside the office, step into the kitchen or the common area in our co-working space and have a chat, because just that ability to switch off your mind helps you regenerate for the next few hours or whatever you're going to spend in the office. So being more conscious, I think seeing it as an extension of your day is really important. If you see it as just another task that you have to complete, you're always going to try and avoid it. But it only takes 66 days apparently for something to become
a habit. Yeah,
so you just got to stick to it,
and then you give up on it, and then it's another cycle to bring it back in. That's the beauty of habits. They kind of come and go until they're done. They're in.
True. Yeah.
So you'll miss it a few days, but for the most part, it sticks around.
Yeah, that's another good rule I have actually as well, mate. Try and go to the gym at least once every 3 days.
Yeah.
Even if it's 20 minutes, you don't have to commit to an hour and a half. Just let yourself reset and get your blood pumping a little bit, so to speak.
Yeah, of course. And so, what are you doing to bring that into the team? Is there any ways that you're bringing that into the culture, or?
Yeah, we've made a good culture of really spending time together as a team to sit and have lunch. Some of the guys go for walks afterwards, which is great. I'm one of the people that do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just getting away from the desk and making a conscious effort to ensure that people are still chatting with each other outside of this work or desk environment.
Because communication is the key, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're all friends, which is really good. We're a close team. We all get on really well together, and I think that helps productivity and culture and all that sort of really important stuff for a business.
That's good. So how do you see recruitment changing in the future? Where do you see it going?
Interesting. There's a lot of articles and haters out there that say that AI will kill recruitment. The recruitment industry keeps on growing 8% year on year for agencies. It's a people-led business, selling people to people. I think it's going to be another 10, 15 years before any AI or any technology can fully take over that process. So I think businesses similar to ours, or businesses that can complement recruitment agencies and make their job easier as a software, that's where we'll see the biggest changes. AI may help with some of the candidate screening, but we're turning it into a really passive market. Most people don't look for jobs anymore. They wait for someone to call them about a job. So that's the challenge that we're going to be dealing with still over the next 10 years. And it's how do we engage those people better?
It's very true. When you say recruitment is growing, you mean more companies are handing over to recruitment?
Yeah, the
revenue.
Rather
than doing it internally.
Exactly, yeah. So there's if you look at global agency spend, it continues to go up every year, which is, if you looked at what everyone else was saying about recruitment dying and whatnot, it's the opposite. So I think we just need to embrace it and just work out better ways that we can partner with agencies.
Yeah, it's interesting. Atlassian said for the first 8 years or so, I think it was, they never used recruiters. I think that's changed now.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a very interesting stat, and they were just saying you should always run always run your own recruitment, because recruiters are kind of just trying to run their own game and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I'd say it's very challenging to.
Yeah, I mean they hire thousands of people, right?
Yeah. It's very challenging to run your own recruitment show in a small company where you're already wearing 100 hats.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we want to make easier, right? It's one of the most important things you'll do is hire new team members. It's critical to business growth, but at the same time, you can't be out on the market sourcing and doing that yourself when you have a business to run.
Yeah, so, and then candidate screening,
exactly.
And I've definitely found as a business owner, better quality candidates come via recruiters.
Yeah.
Than what you'll find yourself. And it goes to that point that most people aren't applying for jobs anymore.
So
they're speaking to recruiters because they know that recruiters are going to find them a better pay in the end. That's the way I've probably seen it. They're going to fight to get them, the salary they want.
Of course,
rather than the candidate approaching the business and going, this is why I should work for you. It's kind of that middle person,
Yeah, you're right. It's and that's where candidate experience comes really important. If recruiters are acting in the best interest of a candidate, that means that they'll typically have the best candidate pool available to them to help employers. So we're actually seeing, it's quite topical in the industry at the moment, how candidate experience is a reflection of a recruiter's performance, and employers are wanting to understand the candidate experiences that recruiters are providing.
And that goes to word of mouth as well, right? So.
Exactly. So it's personal branding and creating trust in the market. We've seen it in B2C. You wouldn't go out and spend $5,000 on a TV without doing your comparison and checking out reviews and ratings. And we're starting to see that shift in the B2B space now, which we're trying to do with the reviews and testimonials on the recruiters as well. Create this personal brand
more transparency into recruitment agencies and
exactly. Who works with who is providing the best services, and what sort of roles are they working on? Because this sort of rich data is really powerful for the decision maker, whether it be an employer or a candidate, choosing who they want to engage as a recruiter.
It's actually a very interesting point that, as you say, getting the right candidates means that they're going to satisfy the employers.
Yeah.
And to get the right candidates, they're going to have a good experience. So
exactly, yeah. The candidates are the commodity these days. We're in a talent short market, so making sure that you're an advocate for great talent means that you're going to be able to place that talent in good roles. Yeah.
So as a business, and this is a more general kind of question, if I'm a business owner, how is it that I can find the best candidates? And it doesn't necessarily have to go to a recruiter, but just in general, what are the things I should be thinking about? Because there's a lot of talk now about culture, and that's what a lot of people are looking for, the dynamics of the company, right? The culture.
Yeah, it's really important, particularly for a startup that might not necessarily have a well-known brand in the market. You've got to demonstrate that actually working inside your company is a real opportunity for the candidate. So it's as much you selling the company to the candidate as it is them selling themselves to you as the next employee. And companies sometimes forget that. They sometimes change the dynamic of an interview whereby it's, you need to work for us. You need to try and sell yourself to us, where it's not like that anymore. In a candidate short market, you're both selling to each other. So I think having a robust process in place in terms of your interview structure, so you can demonstrate that culture and try and understand the culture fit, is really important. Your job adverts that you're putting out there on Seek and LinkedIn, anything you can do to demonstrate culture and demonstrate a good working environment is going to hopefully drive you more candidates to apply for the roles. But you've got to stick to it as well, because if you write things that aren't necessarily true or aren't necessarily values of your business, and someone comes and works for you and they don't feel that within the first 6 months, they're not aligned, and they will leave because jobs are out there.
Yeah, that's true. So it's about being authentic to your value proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You've got to practice what you preach.
No, that's some pretty sound advice, and I think it's definitely one of the hardest challenges is getting and retaining the right people.
Yeah. Retentions are really important because people move jobs a lot more than what they did 10 years ago. So I suppose to retain the best employees, you've got to ensure that you're helping them develop as a person as well.
Great having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks.
Cheers.
If you haven't already, check out our YouTube channel. It's available under the EasyCompanies account, and there'll be a 9 to Survive playlist. So I hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to seeing you next time.